And I didn't know at the time, but I'm still friends with my coach who coached me in those days. And she said, oh, when your mom dropped you off, she said, my kid's going to go to the Olympics one day.
Welcome back to the Missoula podcast. Brandon Smith in studio. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing well. I'm doing really well. I feel like that's what I always say. The truth is, I'm not always well.
You're a liar.
Sometimes, probably. But today I'm well. I'm doing really well. Excited for this episode. Diane, thanks for being here. Thanks for taking time out to come visit with a couple guys about your story.
Gosh, thanks. It's really exciting to be here. You guys are awesome. Your show is great.
Well, thank you.
A lot of your previous guests, so I feel super honored to be here.
Wow.
We're honored to have you.
Yeah. How did you end up in Missoula?
I ended up in Missoula because I like to say that I was a runner. People say you're always a runner. Once a runner, always a runner. But I knew a couple professional athletes that were training in town, an all-female group, and I'd kind of outgrown my stay in Canada, I think, as a Canadian athlete. I had lost sponsorship through Nike. I think I was just too old for them. And decided to make a big plunge to this place I had heard of, didn't really know where it was, and came to Missoula and loved it. And I've stayed.
Yeah. Couple questions for you.
Yeah.
You said was a runner. What changed? Why are you not a runner any longer?
That's such a good question because, same thing. Once you're an Olympian, you're always an Olympian.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things where I think when you've reached a very high level, your mind stays there, but the body doesn't. And so when you're not performing at that level anymore, you kind of don't see yourself as great as you used to be, and you sort of want to move on. But yes, I am definitely grappling with the fact that I am still a runner, and I plan on doing the half marathon this year.
That's awesome.
Come on.
Second question for you. Just hearing you talk, you and I don't sound a lot alike. There's some differences. Where are you originally from?
Yes.
Where is home?
Oh, I so love to talk about accents because you guys are the ones with accents, which is hilarious. I won't criticize the fact that you Americans do not pronounce your T's properly. We won't go there, but originally from South Africa.
South Africa.
Yep. My mom is French.
Okay.
My dad is British. They met in South Africa in the 70s. And I was born Diane Cummins to my dad and Deanne Cummins to my mom. And so I actually just go by D. So people who I know me call me D because that's how I introduce myself to them. So you guys can call me D. So it's just D
from this point
D
forward?
From now on.
D.
Yeah.
D, what was it like growing up in South Africa? What were some of the joys and challenges of that?
God, I had the greatest childhood. South Africa is fantastic. I grew up on the East Coast. It is probably one of the most ecologically diverse countries in the entire world with two different oceans. We have the Atlantic Ocean and the Indian Ocean. I grew up on the Indian Ocean side. I think the coldest temperature for us in the winter is 50 degrees.
Oh.
Yeah, so beautiful, humid, warm. I grew up on 3 acres of property, ran around barefoot. My parents were fantastic. They allowed us to do every sport we wanted to. I went to a great school. Yeah, life was good. Yeah.
What did your parents do for a living?
My dad is in computer programming. I mean, he's had a few jobs and moved on from them, but in my formative years in South Africa, he was a computer programmer, turned into a computer science teacher at a private boys' school. And my mom is a hairdresser. I mean, she still is today. She's amazing.
Are they still in South Africa?
They are in Canada, which is how I ended up on the Canadian track team, and then how I ended up in Missoula. So, yeah, long story.
When were you first introduced to running competitively?
I probably was in primary school. I used to love to run. My parents would punish me when I was naughty. I mean, we just had so much energy and we would always be making too much noise. And for whatever reason, my parents like, oh man, these kids, they've got to do some exercise. So instead of putting us in the corner, my parents would say, run around the house for 10 minutes. And they thought that it was a traumatizing punishment, but I'd be, okay, Mom, what's next? I've done it for 10 minutes, give me the extra challenge. So I was always naturally gifted in athleticism. I played a lot of sports, netball, hockey, swimming. It wasn't until I beat all the boys in my class, age 10, 11, 12, that I thought, gosh, I'm actually pretty good at this.
I was just going to ask you, when did you
know?
realize you were fast?
Yeah, when I was faster than all the boys in primary school, and I was the fastest kid in the school, and that's just,
Which is
you
the
know, kind of
greatest
weird.
honor
Yeah.
of being a 10-year-old. Do you remember the fastest kid at 10 years
Yeah.
old in your school?
Yes.
Ross Wolf, where I'm from. Still remember his name. That's the coolest kid in school if you can run fast.
You get to like field day and they beat
dust
you at everything. It's just,
And that was you.
Yeah,
dude.
I mean, I think I was just popular by virtue of the fact that everybody wanted me on their team.
yeah.
You know, everybody wanted to win. And so that was always picked for all the sports teams. And I have such good memories of my childhood. I look at the kids today and some of them are struggling, friendships, anxieties. And I only remember having one injury. I mean, kids today are injured all the time, like ankles. I mean, kids are having knee surgeries, ankle surgeries. And I just remember having a great, easy childhood and being popular and making friends. And yeah, it was a good time.
Way off subject, but I just recently heard, listened to a podcast where a guy was talking about his daughter was talking about her anxiety at school. And he realized when we were kids, the word anxiety wasn't even, we didn't know that. And we would just go outside and run, just play.
Yeah. I mean,
very interesting.
We're so fortunate. I mean, kids are struggling today with so many different issues that we didn't have. And I think, I look back now and certainly being able to participate in sport from an ability level grounded me. And I was just a happy kid and it was all through sport. So yeah, fortunate for that.
D, born and raised South Africa. And then you alluded to your family moved to Canada.
Yeah.
What was behind that? How old were you? What was that experience of
Canada's
leaving?
not 50 degrees in the winter.
No, it is not.
Tell us about
leaving everything you know and going to another country, another language, another culture.
Yeah, shock. Same language. I mean, my mom is French, so French, she helps us with the Canadian French side of it. But, Canadian English is English. I understand it, but totally different culture. Yeah. So my dad is really smart. And when he finished his sort of teaching at this private boys' school in South Africa, he was hired by a company up in British Columbia to create a computer program that would link the rural mill and, rural side of the business to a head office in Vancouver. And they couldn't find anybody else to do it. So we ended up moving as a family. It wasn't until I was 21 that I left South Africa. So I'd gone through college. So my entire formative years, I was South African. I still feel very South African. I feel part Canadian and very much so part American now. But yeah, so as a family, we immigrated to Vancouver. And yeah, it was a struggle. Hardest time in my life.
Wow. You went to college in South Africa.
Went to college in South Africa. My mom and my dad and my brother, there's just the four of us, they had already left South Africa and I was 1 year away from getting my undergrad. So returned to South Africa. And that was the strangest thing because now I was a non-resident of South Africa and I had to apply for a student visa, which was weird. Finished out my degree and then I joined my family in 1995. Okay. Yeah.
What events were you running in college? What athletically were you doing?
Nothing. Funny enough, I did not run in college. Yes. So I was pretty good at sport in high school. My favorite events were long jump, the sprints, the hurdles. And when I moved to Canada after doing my degree in South Africa, I joined a track club to make friends. And really is as simple as that. And it was a tough time. I struggled a lot. I was totally lost. Everybody spoke English, but it was foreign. It was 3 weeks of solid rain, cold rain too. In South Africa, when it's raining in Durban, it's a warm rain. You can still go out. It's, it doesn't really affect your soul. But in Vancouver, it was depressing. My parents were working their butt off. My brother was working his butt off. I mean, we were immigrants. And my brother went back to school. And then he would work a night shift from like 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. cleaning the floors of London Drugs, So I never saw him. I was not keen to go back to school. I remembered thinking, okay, well, maybe that's what I need to do. Go back to school. That's how I'll make friends. And they wanted me to redo 2 years of my undergrad. because of the transfer. And it was just a horrible time. So I was like, I'm going to join a track club. I'm going to make friends. And that's what I did. I joined a track club, and I remember phoning up the office, and they said, well, are you a competitive or recreational? And I thought, well, I don't really understand what a recreational athlete is, so I'm going to be competitive. So I joined the competitive group. And then they said, well, are you sprints, jumps, or distance? And I thought, well, I'm not a marathoner. And I did long jump in high school. So I'm going to join the long jump group. So it was great. I joined the long jump group. And anyway, to cut a long story short, I dated a guy who was a distance runner. And then I went for a run with him. And he was like, long jumpers can't run for 10 kilometers. You're not a long jumper. And so then, in a roundabout way, I had discussed with my long jump coach, oh, I'd like to do the 100. And she was like, okay. And then the next competition, I said, oh, I'd like to do the 200. And she was like, okay. And then I said, I really like this running thing. I'd like to do the 400. And she was like, oh, I don't know about the 400. You're a long jumper. And so I snuck a 400 in, and same experience as I had when I was a kid. I was just good. And I was getting attention. And it wasn't the attention that I was seeking. It was just the friendships that I wanted. And, and through that, I was just encouraged in the right direction. And then I snuck to Seattle from Vancouver and ran in an 800. And the first 800 that I ran, I did, 70 seconds the first lap. And then second lap, I came back in 62 seconds. So there was just a ton of attention on me.
That's the hardest race, right? The 800?
It is now that I've gone through the whole professional 800 and I've done the training. It is by far and I coached the 800. I didn't know that back then.
Unreal.
I was just running. So so it was really great. And I mean, they were pulling out the Mercier tables, which gives you the score that compares like a hammer thrower to like a long jumper to a 10K runner. And I had like 300 points in the long jump, and I had 800 points in the 800. And so I just had a lot of people saying to me, like, you can do this, Dee, you can run the 800. And so I took it more seriously and joined an 800 meter group. And before I knew it, I made the Canadian team, and kind of snowballed from there.
This is probably the first time I've heard of somebody accidentally making a national team. Most people, because we've had Olympians on before, and most of the time it's like, this was always my goal and my dream, and me and my dad worked so hard to get us to this point. Yeah. You just stumbled into it. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think now that I coach, I see my life story, and you take lessons from your own life. And this is what I use for the kids that I coach nowadays. It's like sometimes people see something in you that you don't see in yourself. Mm-hmm. And that was definitively my story.
Did you have a coach during those teenage years when you were out running
yes.
Or was it not until Canada where you had?
No, I had, the school system in South Africa is amazing when it comes to after school sport. You are really encouraged to participate in 2 hours at least a week. And I went to a private girls' school. Didn't like it at first. Change is hard. Didn't like it at first, but learned to love it because just made so many friends through sport. We played netball and swimming, and so I was always busy. When I was beating all those boys at my primary school, my mom was like, she's going to sign up for a track club. So we have lots of sports clubs in South Africa, and I joined Pinetown and District Athletic Club. And I didn't know at the time, but I'm still friends with my coach who coached me in those days. And she said, oh, when your mom dropped you off, she said, my kid's going to go to the Olympics one day. She said, she's really good. She beats all the boys in her class. She'll be an Olympian one day. So I think my mom knew it. I didn't know that at the time. My coach laughs and says, oh yeah, all the parents say that. And it's true. All your parents do say that because now I coach. But so I mean, I think it was possibly predetermined for me. I'm not sure, but I've always just risen out of struggle. And I think being in Canada and being depressed and not having a goal and being completely lost and really regretting leaving South Africa, I don't regret it at all because I think I needed to leave South Africa to become an Olympian.
Your story's fascinating.
Yeah.
Can we hit pause on your story, go to our rapid fire questions, and then I want to hear about your Olympic experience, hear about what you're doing now, and then really hear about just some of the life lessons you've learned from your years of running and coaching. If does that work for you guys? Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
First initial memory of Missoula, Montana.
Van Buren exit, thinking, that kind of sounds Dutch. Van Buren, that's kind of close to South Africa, Afrikaans side. Going over, driving, navigating my way over Higgins Street Bridge and thinking, wow, there is a river that runs through this town. And this is cool. I grew up on the coast. Rapid fire, no such thing with D.
That's all right. You're good.
I grew up on the coast and I thought there's no ways I can live inland.
Yeah.
We moved from South Africa to Vancouver. It's coastal. And I thought I'm going to feel super trapped in this land, all this land around me. Drove over Higgins Street Bridge and thought, wow, this is cool. And then having breakfast with Courtney at Hobnob. Remember Hobnob. Yes. I just loved it. I think I've been to a lot of places that just haven't felt good.
Yeah.
And when I drove into Missoula, I just felt like the soul. Yeah.
D, what year did you come into
2006.
2006.
Yes. Yes. I came on a recruiting trip actually to join this professional group of female runners in town. They were called Mountain West Track Club. And I think they were the group that brought me in. I think they were just trying to show me the best of Missoula because I stayed in the Doubletree. Beautiful view of the M.
Mm-hmm.
There were like guys fishing. And I was just like, wow, this is heaven. I love it here.
Awesome. Yeah. What's your favorite coffee shop?
Oh, rapid fire question. Okay, I'll speak really quickly to make it rapid. Depends what I'm doing.
Okay.
So if I'm meeting with athletes or friends or catching up with community members, it's usually Drum or Clyde. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention Le Petit on Sundays with my husband. Every Sunday, it's kind of a ritual. Go to Le Petit, get your coffee, take the dogs for a walk on the Kim Trail.
Amazing.
Favorite restaurant?
Oh, that's also such a tough one. We're so gifted with all these amazing places.
We really are.
Yeah, it's tough because I feel like I have my date night is Camino. Like too lazy to cook, the Keep. Feeling like something spicy, we go to Zutai. The New Mexican is one of my new favorites.
Every restaurant you just said, I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, they're so good.
Yep.
Like, how can you just pick one?
Yeah.
You can't pick one. No.
What zip code do you live in?
Best zip code. 59803.
Yes.
I knew you'd love that.
Hands down the best zip code in Missoula, Montana.
Yep.
For all the reasons. Do you want me to list them, Stephen?
Moving on. What is the weirdest thing about Missoula to you?
Oh, I know your people on the podcast. People are quirky and weird, which is great. But I do have to say the intersections. I will be south turning onto Arthur, and I'm like, if you didn't know, like, how would you know that left-hand turn has right of way here? They're so weird.
I love this question on every episode, D. And I think, Nick, correct me if I'm wrong. If we went back and listened to every episode, the two most common answers are the people and the intersections. The streets, the roundabouts, the slant streets, the people, the diversity. It's the same. So I don't know if we need to get rid of this question or keep it because the answers become so predictable.
No, and
the people in the streets.
I'm trying to think of something different that isn't the same as everybody else. But honestly, like I'll be there by Sign Pro at that weird intersection trying to get to like my boxing class in the morning. And I'm like, this is a weird intersection. Yeah. Or like the slant streets that are north of town. Yep. You've got the slant streets in the residential area that we know here, Midtown. But if you look at the map of Missoula, man, it's weird.
It is weird.
Yeah.
What do you love the most about Missoula?
The people, hands down. That question, like honestly, like I can go to a real fancy cocktail party in my Birkenstocks and I fit right in. Like it is nice. Fantastic.
So true.
Yes, I feel this place is the best because I feel no judgments. People can just be people, and I think that's really important. The community is extra special.
Is there a particular book that's made a significant impact on your life?
I think probably from a professional perspective, there's a running coach, a guru, older guy now, Jack Daniels. He has written, I think he's on his 4th edition now of the Daniels formula. And it resonates with me a lot because I was a successful athlete, not knowing at the time, because my coach coached me the way that Jack coaches. And that's how I now coach. And he's incredible. He's from psychology to nutrition to energy systems to just really laying it out there every time. I mean, it's like my textbook. I'll go back and I'll be like, oh, what has he written about this? Like what's the latest and greatest? And it's profound because I think as coaches, especially now with the internet, we are inundated with information. And it's such a great resource to go back and be like, no, I am on the right path. I am doing the right thing here. I mean, every athlete is different and you can sway depending on their gifts, their weaknesses, and their strengths. But definitely, I think if anybody is wanting to train for themselves or to coach or to understand everything about running, it's a great book. Yeah.
So back to your story, D. You're running, you're beating all the boys. You move across the pond. You're running, you're beating everyone. You get that call. You are on the Canadian national team. What was that? What was that like? What was that day, that moment when you got the call?
Gosh, I think when I got the call, I don't remember it hitting home until I got the team uniform. They, that year they sent it to us. It was 1998. Okay. I made the Canadian track team to the Commonwealth Games, which is not something Americans are familiar with, but Commonwealth Games is all Commonwealth countries get to compete, and it's very competitive. I mean, we're competing against a lot of African countries, Great Britain. At that time, the top 800-meter runner in the world was Maria Matola from Mozambique. Mozambique was in the Commonwealth. It was a pretty big deal. Mm-hmm. I remember getting the team uniform, and that's when I was like, whoa, I've got to make some decisions here, because the next level is full time. I mean, we weren't really professional because professional means you make a lot of money. But in terms of time and dedication, it's like, I've got to make some changes. Yeah. Like, who's going to coach me? How do I get my support? My original degree is for sports psychology. So I knew that professional athleticism and does come with that mental side. And I just wanted to be full in. I felt pretty proud. I felt a little guilty that I wasn't competing for South Africa.
I was going to ask you about that. Like, you put on that Canadian uniform, you're South African.
Yeah.
What did that feel like? Was that just weird?
Yeah, it did. It felt weird, but I had a lot of gratitude towards the path that had gotten me there. And it was the Canadians who had said, you can do this. You can be this 800-meter runner. You have so much more to do. Like, you're making the 800 team based on long jump training. So shout out to my long jump coach. Yeah. She got me to run a pretty good 800.
Was there any pushback from Canadians that were like, wait, my spot was just taken by a South African. This should be a Canadian team.
Not at all.
Not at all.
No.
Full support.
Full on love. I mean, Canadians are amazing.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah. Full on love. And not just from the athletes and my peers, but from the governing body. Mm-hmm. Athletics Canada was super supportive. I ended up I was in Vancouver and I moved to Victoria to train with the Canadian middle distance team. Yeah. Yes, they do get 2/3 less rain. So
good to know.
That was a good draw for me to move to Victoria. I needed to just be in the community of Canadian distance runners, middle distance, I should say. Mm-hmm. And Team Canada coach at the time was there, and I wanted to be trained by the best, coached by the best, around the best support, the PT, the massage. And I mean, I think I moved to Victoria with $500 in my bank account.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I had a lot of gratitude for the Canadians wanting to support me. And so I was very proud to represent Canada. But I did feel bad that I wasn't competing for South Africa. And then it hit me pretty hard when we were at the Commonwealth Games, because South Africa is a Commonwealth country. And, this was one of the first years that we had young athletes representing South Africa. I mean, we'd gotten through apartheid. South Africa was now back into international competition. And I would have loved to have represented South Africa for that reason. And I got more backlash from them, actually.
Really?
Because they were like,
did you know any of those runners from growing up in South Africa? Or
no, I had just heard of them, through news and following the sport. I mean, I've always followed sport way back from when Zola Budd and Mary Decker-Slaney had a kerfuffle on the track in 1984 during the Olympics. I was 10 years old. So I've always been super supportive of South African sports, all of the athletes. And so I had heard of them and I was kind of like, oh my gosh, there's, Heidi, she's the top South African hydra. I was starstruck meeting those guys because I get to tell my friends in South Africa who I just met,
right.
forgetting that I'm in that environment myself. But yeah.
So you were sort of feeling not like an imposter, but this is amazing. I can't believe I'm here.
Yeah, pretty much so, because it wasn't a determination that I had set, like, this is the goal that I'm going to achieve. I just had my environment just like swept me up and I was just going with it. And so it took a while for me to be like, okay, I can do this. I'm going to go to the Olympics. Yeah. So it took a while. I mean, I tried to go to the Olympics in 2000 and didn't make it. I had a knee surgery. Then I made 2004. So that was super special. Yeah.
Walk us through making the Olympics in 2004. What was that experience like? How did you do?
Yeah.
So Athens?
Yeah. Athens.
If I recall.
Yep. Yeah. So obviously that's the pinnacle of an athlete's career, especially in amateur sports, the Olympic sports. And it's the top of the top. It's not in terms of competition, because we do have the World Championships, and the World Championships is as competitive as the Olympics. The Olympics is just what street people think of as the best ever. So you're going to get money. You're going to get the best accolades if you do well at the Olympics. And I was ranked 7th in the world that year. Canada was a little slim on medal winners. And as we know with middle distance running, if you're in the final, you have a pretty good shot of making top 3. So I was kind of pimped as being this top 3, medalist, and I'm going to save Canada's track record because now we're going to have this medalist. And I didn't make the final. So it was really shocking, and I think this is where the pressure of high performance sports comes in, because you have your personal struggles and goals and achievements and expectations, but then you also have everybody else's. And the difference is that what's going on. Nobody else around you does. Mm-hmm. And it was tough. I mean, Athens was hot. I had just come off my menstrual cycle, and it was just devastating to my body. I had no energy at all. And I ran my heart out, and the performance just wasn't there on the day. And I laugh about this too, because I've had friends that have said, oh, it must be so fun to work out for a living. And I have always been very offended by that. Now I'm like, oh, I really love to go back to working out for a living. But it isn't just about the training. It's about getting it right on the day and making
so many things have to go right.
Right. The biggest event on the calendar, it only happens every 4 years, and you have to get it right. Mm-hmm. And there's just some things you can't control. And so I felt satisfied that I had tried my best, but then you go through the media zone and man, they're cutthroat. D, you're supposed to be Canada's, medal hopeful. What happened?
Oh, geez.
And then so you're there and you're
kind of like coming on the Missoula podcast. You get these questions.
And it's tough. You're on the spot.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be
what did
so
happen,
honest. What did happen?
So what did happen in that race?
I really wanted to tell them what I was feeling.
Yes.
But you get the backlash from that too, you know? So I was just like, well, I tried really hard and I just didn't have it in me today. And it's like, you're sugarcoating all the emotions. And
outside of the race, what was the Olympic Athens experience like?
It's super stressful in the beginning
Okay.
because there's like so many things you want to do, but you're also saving your legs and your energy. Once you've competed, it's so awesome. I mean,
did you participate in opening ceremonies?
I didn't. Courtney, my friend, did. So I got to live it through her experience. But yeah, my coach, all coaches are different. And being on my legs for 6 hours, it just wasn't in the cards for me to go to the Olympic. I went to the closing, which was super fun. Yeah.
Talk about being starstruck at Commonwealth Games with some of the runners. How about the Olympics? Any starstruck? Who'd you meet?
So many
Who'd you
stories.
see? Yeah.
Andy Roddick. I mean, I remember we were just like, we saw him in the dining hall where all the athletes go. And, you have to remind yourself, like, I am here too. I am a great athlete. I might not have won the world championships or previous Olympics or be like Wimbledon champion. But you kind of forget that when you're there with all these great athletes, you're so starstruck. Yeah, it is. It's really cool. That's the best part of the Olympics, I think.
And I'd be the same way if I saw Andy.
Yeah,
I'd be like, it's Andy Roddick.
Yeah, it's just so cool.
Yeah.
I loved your perspective on saying I gave my best. I just didn't have it that day. As you reflect 21 years later, what were some of the biggest lessons or insight that you got out of that experience that has helped you to where you are now? Gosh,
I think probably the biggest thing is not to put so much pressure, on myself. Once I had come 5th in the World Championships, and suddenly it was about needing to be as good or better than that. Mm-hmm. And I lost perspective on the fact that these are the same girls that I've raced every race, every championship for the last 5 years, and the environment just got the better of me. I think, you get to that Olympic pressure cooker, and I should have just gone back to D. Like, I got here by circumstance. Like, I am good instead of, and I the kids I coach nowadays, I'm like, don't think about the outcome. It's the journey, and it truly is the journey. And I know in those days when I wanted to win because I felt the pressure of external, and I just was too stressed out. Yeah.
You've accomplished what millions never will, only dream of. And so just the fact that you were there and on that track is amazing and really, really cool story. Looking back at your career and races, what would you say was the best race of your career? Like, when was that? What was it?
Yeah, these are tough questions. I think as an
we're pretty much the media at the Olympics.
Yeah.
We're pretty good at what we do.
Yeah, you're really good at what you do. I'm not crying yet, so you're not quite good enough.
Yeah,
but
let's turn it up.
Yeah.
Challenge accepted.
It's like a 800-meter runner. You get to do a couple races a week. I ran a lot of races. I think in 1 year I ran 25 races in one season. And I have best races that are different for different reasons. But I think from an athletic perspective, I would say when I ran the Canadian record, because it was a big goal that year I can break the Canadian record. And this was the last race of the season. I was so tired. And my coach said, these are your splits. No. He said, the splits are going to be, because there's a rabbit, the splits are going to be 57. If you want to run 57, you have to be right behind the rabbit. So I was like, okay, I can be right behind the rabbit. I think another athlete got given the exact same command from a coach, because both of us were fighting to be right behind the pacemaker, the rabbit. And we ended up going through the 400, a second and a half too quick. And then on the back stretch, my competitor, she kind of fell back. I got to 600. I saw the time clock, and I had gone through in 1:26, which was a 600-meter PR. I mean, a 600 race PR, and I still had 200 meters to go. And I remember coming around the corner, and suddenly I was like starting to see stars, and I was like, okay, the fatigue is setting in. After the race, one of my teammates said he thought I was going to fall over with 150 meters to go. And I'm like, okay, so that makes sense because that's exactly how I felt. And I still had to like finish. And I just kept thinking to myself, 32 seconds. Anybody can run 32 seconds. 32 seconds for 200. That's easy. You can do this. You got this. And I broke the tape, and suddenly all the media was around me because I had broken the Canadian record. And the Canadian record was by a standout runner from Canada, Charmaine Krups. I mean, she was just Canada's golden girl for a very long time. So I was pretty proud of that moment, and that was a good race.
What was your time?
1:58:39.
Wow.
Yeah, which, in those days was pretty good. Now the girls are running 1:55 every other weekend.
These days it's pretty good.
Yeah. It's kind of a little joke I have with the high school boys that I coach. I'm like, well, I'm still faster than you. So that was a fun race just because it was a really big goal. And I achieved it at the very last race of the season, when most of the time you're just getting it done for a couple $100 here or there just to make some money, but pretty proud of that accomplishment.
D, back episode 76, we had your good friend, Courtney Babcock, on the show. How did you and Courtney, two Olympian runners, how did you guys meet, develop this friendship, and what are you guys doing today?
I think we probably have very different memories of how we met. I just remember Courtney as being super bubbly, super easygoing, and the perfect person that I wanted to room with on a track team. So we ended up rooming together early on in our careers, and we would always request to room with each other because we just got along. And I mean, I think when you have a great roommate, it can help your performance. And we just became buddies because of that. I mean, we were roommates at the Olympics. She was running in different events, which helps. So you're not rooming with a competitor. And yeah, we just used to laugh a lot. Like Courtney makes me laugh a lot. She's so bubbly, and she just, reminds me to not take life too seriously. And, I think I alluded to that earlier. I think I took life quite seriously. And she just reminds me to laugh whenever I can. Yeah.
Been about 21 years since the Olympics. Where did life lead you from there? And maybe lead us into, it sounds like you're a coach, lead us into a little bit of what you're doing today and some of the passions you're going through.
Yeah. So moved to Missoula to be a part of Mountain West Track Club. And it was through that process that I discovered real true friendships. All of the girls that train in that group, we are still friendly. We still get together. I think because of that, I decided I needed to stay in Missoula. This was my place. This was my home. This is the closest to South Africa that I've ever felt. And moved from being an athlete, which is a P1 visa, to applying for a green card. Towards the latter years, so I mean, I ran right up until 40. I was a professional full-time runner till age 40. And the last couple of years of my contract with Mountain West, one of our ex-athletes had created this youth track club. And it was a branch of the elite group. So it's Mountain West Youth Track Club. And in that contract as an elite runner, I was required to volunteer with Vicky, who's now the director of the club. This youth club started with 6 athletes. We now have 150. So in the beginning days, when I moved from being an athlete to being a legal resident of the United States with a green card, I volunteered, and Vicky left. And the position was open to be head coach of Mountain West Youth Track Club. And it was just the perfect transition. I was leaving my professional life. Never thought after being an athlete that I would ever want to work with athletes. Ever, ever, ever.
Yeah, what did you want to do? What was the...
I don't know.
Idea?
I was waiting for my environment to push me in the right direction. That's kind of the way I roll. Yeah. And it kind of worked out. Yeah.
It did exactly that.
It did that. I for sure knew that I was not going to be a sports psychologist. I mean, I think you can attest to the fact that people are successful in sport because of some other reason that's got them there. And I just didn't want to deal with that population. I was some points in my career, I'm not proud of it, but I was certainly a high maintenance athlete. And I just didn't want to deal with that. So I was like, I'm not going to be a sports psychologist. I'm just going to wait for my green card to come through. This is perfect. I'm going to take over and do the Mountain West thing for a little while, and then I'll figure it out. And I absolutely love it. So I'm sticking with it now. So we no longer have the Mountain West Track Club Elite Group. We have this Mountain West Youth Track Club. And I'm the head coach of that. I coach mainly the distance kids. We're super busy in the indoor season. So right now we're actually going to our last competition of the year. It's this weekend. And then we have a summer program.
D, what's more difficult for you as a coach? The students you coach or the parents?
You had to ask that question. So
I'm
now
trying to
all
make
the
you cry. I'm
parents-
trying to get to the tears.
No, the tears. The tears come from the athletes. The
Okay.
athletes make me cry. Like, I don't have kids of my own. My husband has 6, so I get to take care of those guys. But I always think, to answer your question, the parents, biggest problem. The kids are not a problem.
Well, let's dive into that.
Yeah.
Use your psychology degree with sports. If you could speak into the lives of all parents who have student athletes, what is one piece of advice you would give the parents?
Take their cell phones away. We've got kids not sleeping through the night because they're on their cell phones. That just does, it doesn't just lead to a bad performance because the kids are not sleeping. The bad performance leads to the kids not being happy because they're not running PRs. Kids want to run PRs every time they get on the track. They don't have the understanding of, the progression. And, currently we are now technically off season. Our program is designed to prepare kids for their spring track season, for their performances to be at the state championships, and so it's just a snowball effect. And I'll have parents say, my kid's not sleeping. I'll take their cell phones away. Like, we have a rule on our track trips. We take their cell phones away. And I say to the kids, if your parents have a problem, have the parents contact me, because I really do feel like the kids are in a different space than we were growing up. And they're just, it affects so much, not just their performance, it affects their social skills. It affects performance anxiety is a big thing that we're dealing with. And so I think there's a lot of things that the parents can do to help coaches in Missoula. And I really, truly believe that that's one of them.
What are you most proud of as a coach?
I'm proud of, probably just stems from my story too. The kids who come in as loners, they come into the club and they don't really know anyone. They're super shy. And by the end of the season, they're hanging out with kids from other schools. Most of my photographs, I look back at the photographs that I take of the kids. I get excited about capturing the moment when I have a Hellgate kid on a relay team with a Big Sky kid and a Sentinel kid and a Frenchtown kid. Or when we go to the spring school seasons and I see the parents from different schools hanging out together because they know each other from the indoor track season, or we have a summer season as well. So I think it's the connections, which kind of aligns with why I love Missoula so much. It's, we start our indoor season a couple weeks after cross country. And if you've been to any cross country meet, it is like staunch Hellgate against Big Sky, against, Sentinel. But this club, and I'm so proud of it, this club allows these kids to learn movement in their friendship groups and to be able to cheer for somebody who does actually go to a different school, because now they're on the Mountain West Track Club. So a lot of those moments, I'm proud of helping kids connect. And I'll pick up on kids who don't have friends, and I'll try to say, oh, okay, Johnny, what school do you go to? You're Washington Middle School. Great. Have you met Sarah? She goes to Meadow Hill, and I see those moments where these kids need those connections. Yeah. And so, we've got great athletes. We've got kids competing at the Nike Indoor Nationals coming up in a couple of weeks, but it's those little connections that I can see that I just want our kids to cope, Kids, I've when I moved from South Africa to Canada, I was not coping. I was in a very dark place. And some of our kids have been there. I think we're doing better now, a couple years past COVID, but kids are struggling. And if I can be a little part of the process where I feel like they're going to be okay, that's what makes me proud to be involved in the coaching community and to be with the kids.
Last question for me. Thank you for opening up and sharing your story with us.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Looking back at your career, both as an athlete and a coach, and even as a teenager in South Africa, what's one of the greatest life lessons you've learned through the adversity you have faced time and time again, from giving up everything you know to move to a foreign land where some of your darkest days, to the training, the losses, the coaching, the disappointment that comes with life? What have you learned?
I think it's definitely that somebody else sees something in you that you don't see in yourself. And I've lived it. And I'm so grateful for Missoula and my friends. But I've also heard from parents, and parents are living with kids who are suicidal. Parents are living with kids who are making really poor choices. I was young once. I made poor decisions, but they were in a safe environment. And I just feel like our kids it's dangerous. Our kids are in a dangerous place. And I've had parents required to be on the bus because they don't want to leave their child unattended. I can't imagine. I'm not a parent. I can't imagine being a parent worried that their child might do something to harm themselves. And I think for me, with being a coach, I would love for my sport to be that avenue where kids can find themselves and feel like they belong, or feel proud of themselves, or gain some confidence, or to know not to make those bad decisions that, could end up in horrible, horrible results. So yeah, I think I try to say to the kids, a team meeting every year, I say, trust someone around you, because they will find something in you that you don't see in yourself. And that could make the difference. Be happy. And, I think we're always going against the grain and making our lives more difficult. And I think sometimes it just takes you trusting that someone says, hey, you're not a long jumper. You are an 800-meter runner. And I found my happiness, and I found my confidence. And yes, as a professional runner, I had a lot of challenges, but I am happy. I was happy. As a professional runner for 15 years, the best place of my life. And I just see these kids dealing with very adult topics these days, and just be kids and have fun and try something different. And if I think you should do the hurdles, try the hurdles. Who knows who you'll become out of that. Yeah. So that's my life lesson. Somebody will see something in you that you don't see in yourself. Yeah. Trust them. Yeah.
What's in there? That was beautiful. Thank you for the impact you're making in our community.
Oh.
Thank you for giving back. Thank you for seeing potential in young people and giving that gift forward.
Yeah, thanks.
Appreciate you.
You guys are so meaningful in this community, and we're making so many connections through the people we're listening to. And appreciate you. You're doing good work.
Awesome. Thanks, Dee.
Thank you.
Thanks.
What's up, Missoula? This is Nick Balla, producer of the Missoula podcast. We truly appreciate you hanging out with us as we dive into the stories that make our city special. If you could do us a quick favor and follow the show wherever you are listening, whether that's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, maybe you're watching on YouTube, so hit that little subscribe button. It really helps us out. Head on over to www.themissoulapodcast.com for more information, and we'll see you next week.